Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include bad news for the Knights of the Old Republic remake, the former head of Eidos calling Square Enix's management a train wreck, the Diablo 3 Season 27 PTR patch that brings new hope, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the description below, but right before you skip ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes and stay up to date with gaming news highlights. In our first quick story, according to a new study, gamers have enhanced brain activity and superior decision-making skills. Researchers from Georgia State University concluded that video games could be used to train decision-making efficiency. I always found the argument, oh, video games are gonna rot your brains, odd, particularly when it tended to come from people who would spend their time watching television. In other news, according to famous leaker Jeff Grubbs, the developers of action-adventure game Immortals Fenyx Rising are working on a new spin-off for the franchise that will be based on Polynesian culture. The game's apparently in pre-production right now, and it's unlikely to release before 2025. Immortals Fenyx Rising released in 2020 to generally favorable reviews. It was praised for its humor, its story, combat, and open-world design, and it was criticized for seeming like a ripoff of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So according to Grubbs, this new game will still have stylized graphics, but they'll look more distinct from Breath of the Wild. Now, if you've played Immortals Fenyx Rising, sound off in the comments with your thoughts on the game. In other news, Lord of the Rings Gollum has been delayed by, quote, a few months. The devs will give an exact release date in the near future, but they said this delay is because they want to deliver the best experience possible. Now, it should be noted that on July 7th, a gameplay reveal trailer for the game debuted, and it got overwhelmingly disliked on YouTube. I suspect the negative reaction to this trailer played a big part in the delay. The graphics were the main thing that was criticized, but there was also some mocking that the only gameplay the game seems to have is crawling and climbing. In other news, Stray, the cat game, has overtaken God of War to become the highest rated game on Steam in 2022, according to Steam 250. So Stray rank 1, God of War rank 2, and meanwhile, Elden Ring sits at rank 39 on this list, so take from that what you will. Stray is certainly a great game, but I think that the cat memes are responsible for it being number 1. In World of Warcraft Classic news, the Wrath of the Lich King leak has been confirmed to be true. The expansion will release on September 26th. Then separately, Blizzard has basically removed boosting from the game by implementing an XP nerf in groups that have a big player level difference, as well as by targeting these specific boosting runs and applying buffs and nerfs to prevent the common boosting tactics from working, like making mobs become immune to slows and roots after 30 seconds, or gaining the ability to apply repeated stuns to paladins. A lot of the community seems really happy about this. And my question to you folks is, if you are a WoW Classic player, what are your thoughts on Blizzard trying to kill boosting? In other news, according to a report by Bloomberg, GTA 6 will include a pair of playable protagonists, male and female, who are influenced by famous bank robbers Bonnie and Clyde. However, development on the game has been slower than expected. Also, GTA veteran Dan Houser, who either wrote or co-wrote pretty much all previous GTA games, will not be on GTA 6. So it'll be interesting to see where the story may go and whether it's going to feel different from the previous games. Now, apparently in early development, GTA 6 was intended to be bigger in scope than any previous GTA game, covering regions modeled after large swaths of North and South America. Since then, though, the scope has been reined in a lot, with the main map now representing a fictional version of the city of Miami, so not too unlike Vice City, as well as Miami's surrounding areas. And instead, post-release, the devs intend to add new cities on a regular basis. Still though, GTA 6 at launch will include more interior locations than any previous GTA title. Now, industry analysts expect GTA 6 to release in 2024, but according to Bloomberg, the devs are allegedly skeptical that they'll release within that time frame, despite the game being in development since 2014. Meanwhile, Rockstar is bringing a huge amount of quality of life improvements to Grand Theft Auto Online, including allowing players to participate in money-making activities in private lobbies rather than just public lobbies. In another Bloomberg report, they're on fire this week, the remake of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic has been delayed indefinitely. This comes after developer Aspyr Media fired the game's design director and art director this month. The studio heads told employees that the project is now on pause and that the company is looking for new contracts and development opportunities. The remake was announced last September, but had been in development for nearly 3 years. Then apparently on June 30th, Aspyr had finished a demo of the game to show partners Lucasfilm and Sony, and 1 week later, the design director and art director were fired. Yikes. On top of that, Aspyr wanted the game released by the end of the year, but the devs felt that a more realistic target would be 2025. Some devs believe that the project will be turned over to another studio, Saber Interactive, which has been doing outsourcing work on the game. Aspyr Media has been around since 1996, but they've mostly been a company that produces ports of games. So the choice to hand them this project was a little unusual to begin with. I'm not saying the devs can't handle it, I don't know them, but given how important this project is, since KOTOR is such a beloved game, and so if it wasn't amazing, if the product didn't turn out to be amazing, it would be destroyed by fans. I'm just surprised that the project wasn't given to a studio with a proven record in handling projects like these. In other news, in an interview with GamesIndustry.biz, Stéphane Dastu, the founder and former boss of Eidos Montreal, described Square Enix's handling of its Western studios as, quote, a train wreck in slow motion. Now, just recently, Square Enix sold off Eidos Montreal, Square Enix Montreal, and Crystal Dynamics, all of its Western studios, plus all their IPs, all the IPs they owned like Tomb Raider and Deus Ex. They sold them off for the bargain bin price of $300 million. As a point of contrast, Sony bought Bungie, one single company that has only one franchise, Destiny, for $3.6 billion. Dastu was surprised that the Western studios were sold off for so little, but he wasn't surprised that they were sold off. Apparently, when he left Eidos in 2013, he already saw where the relationship between Square Enix and Eidos was headed. Square Enix had purchased Eidos in 2009, and Dastu had hoped that the company would help out Eidos with one of its weaknesses: marketing and actually selling the games that they made. Instead, Square Enix just kept saying they were disappointed in Eidos' profits. And the Eidos studios were focused on making single-player titles and core franchises like Tomb Raider and Deus Ex, without live service models, so they can go a year without releasing anything that really generates revenue. And Square Enix would treat that like, well, you lost $65 million this year. Well, yeah, they didn't release anything because they're making the games. Dastu and his team felt pressured by this, and Dastu in particular was losing hope that Square Enix would bring great things to Eidos. He says that the financial reports from Square always included a line or two about how they were disappointed with certain games that didn't reach expectations. And those games were always the Western releases, never the Japanese ones. More recently, Dastu said he heard rumors that Sony was interested in buying Square Enix, but only its Japanese studios, not the Western ones. So he suspects that this is why Square Enix had a garage sale to sell off the Western studios. Embracer Group ended up buying those studios, again for $300 million. And as another point of comparison, a more direct one, Embracer bought Gearbox, developer of Borderlands, for $1.3 billion. Overall, Dastu points to problems with management stemming from Square Enix Japan, as well as the Western office, Square Enix London. There's a reason he left the company in 2013, and why the studio head of Crystal Dynamics left 2 years later, and IO Interactive 2 years after that negotiated a buyout to separate itself from Square Enix. Things will hopefully be better under Embracer, which tends to give its studios a lot of autonomy, but Dastu is concerned that there isn't enough strong leadership in place to be left autonomous. He fears that if the studios just keep doing what they've been doing, things are not going to improve. Time will tell. In other news, MultiVersus, the Warner Bros. Cross-universe, cross-platform fighter game, entered open beta this week and is doing very well. It's being played more than every other fighting game on PC combined, though that's not exactly a really popular genre on PC. And it's also reached a higher concurrent player count than any fighter game on Steam ever has. The combination of free-to-play plus a ton of recognizable characters from various franchises is certainly contributing to this success. The question is, will this success last? If you haven't heard of MultiVersus, it's basically Super Smash Bros. Warner Bros. Edition. Also with LeBron James? On to some Diablo news. A new version of DevilutionX released this week. DevilutionX is a sourced port of Diablo 1 and its expansion Hellfire that lets the game run properly on modern computers and adds some bug fixes, some game engine improvements, and optional quality of life features. Features added include adding the Barbarian and the Bard classes. These were developed for Hellfire, but were never finished So they were found in the game files, and the Devilution devs finished them up and released them. They also added auto pickup, the ability to run in town, Pepin automatically healing you, and Adria automatically refilling your mana. They added a stash, and more, and all of these features can be disabled if you want a pure experience. You do need to own a legal copy of Diablo 1 to play DevilutionX, which you can get off GOG.com. In Diablo 3 news, we got a PTR patch this week for the upcoming patch 274 and Season 27, and it's a whopper, bringing a lot more than I expected. First, some bad news. The crazy 20 magic missile per shot wizard, nerfed down to 10 missiles. Ouch. This was a big nerf to the Firebird wizard, and more importantly, a big nerf to the hearts and souls of wizard players. Firebird nonetheless seems to remain the top wizard build. Now, to compensate for the nerf to the number of magic missiles, they buffed the Mirror Ball, which was previously useless, to add now a 500% increased damage to magic missiles. So we're shooting fewer missiles, but this still comes out to a buff if you have a magic missile build. The thing is, Firebird uses magic missile, but it's not the magic missiles dealing the damage. The magic missiles are just a vehicle to deliver the 6-piece Firebird damage. So this buff on the Mirror Ball does not buff Firebird, it buffs other builds, which is actually great. However, we were hoping to see a DMO magic missile build start rising. However, it seems that the best version of DMO right now is Meteor. It actually works in 2 pieces of Tal Rasha, so it's pretty interesting actually, but it still falls behind Firebird. And actually, as I'm editing this video, it seems a more powerful version of DMO is on the rise. This one being Frozen Orb using the Arcane Orbit Sanctified Power. As for pure Tal Rasha Meteor, that's even further behind. That needs some love. Otherwise, Tal Rasha, apart from being mixed in with DMO a little bit, is dead in the water for Season 27. Now, they also fixed the broken Wizard Storm Armor Sanctified Power. That was resulting in just absurd 150 clears with any build, effectively. That was, we'll call it an exploit, but I mean, it was on PTR, it was in testing, that's fine. They fix it, it's gone. Now that Sanctified Power will charge over the course of 30 seconds, and if you cast it at full charge, it'll instantly kill a random enemy within 30 yards, unless it's a boss or elite, in which case it'll deal significant damage. So its power has been brought much more in line into a reasonable place. Then Barbarians are still looking incredibly strong after the patch. One of the top builds of Season 27 is looking to be a Legacy of Dreams Hammer of the Ancients build that works in the Sanctified Whirlwind power, which makes Whirlwind suck in all nearby enemies. So this allows you to be spinning around with Whirlwind to group enemies super tightly before bringing your hammer down on them, which makes for really efficient killing in high GR pushing. And this still seems to be the favored Sanctified Power, despite seeing a buff now to the Hammer of the Ancients Sanctified Power. Then the Wrath of the Waste Barbarian, the real Whirlwind Barbarian, seems to be benefiting nicely from the buff to the Tempest Rhythm Sanctified Power, which basically doubles your damage. For the Crusader, the Sanctified Power that summons 2 angels was changed, arguably nerfed, and yet it still seems too strong, allowing pretty much any build to beat GR 150. Those angels definitely need more nerfs or reworks. For Demon Hunters, we got some updates to the Cluster Arrow Sanctified Power, and Marauder builds are now looking really strong. They also fixed the bug that was stopping the Strafe Sanctified Power from working properly, and now they also changed how the Strafe skill works. It can now work with any weapon rather than requiring a bow. So the Shadow Impale Demon Hunter now works in this Sanctified Power and is looking really strong. This was a very nice surprise. The Unhallowed Essence set also works in the Strafe Power, but it's not as strong as the Impale build. For Monks, following the adjustments to the Wave of Light Sanctified Power, Sunmuko is doing pretty good, but Legacy of Dreams Wave of Light is still dominating. This is looking to be a top build of the season. The Uliana build is looking strong, but not nearly as strong as LOD Wave of Light. The Inna Monk with Fire Ally got a surprise buff, which partially reverts an old nerf. You see, the Bindings of the Lesser Gods bracers used to apply 5 times its damage bonus to Fire Allies. Then when that dominated, they removed that aspect of the item in the currently live season, which promoted other Mystic Ally runes. But now, after nerfing 6-piece Inna into the ground, they added a 3 times damage bonus back to Fire Allies on those bracers. So Inna's is a little better but I doubt it'll be competitive for pushing next season. Still good for speedruns though. For the Necromancer, the Trag'Oul Blood Nova build is looking to be a top build of Season 27. Meanwhile, Rathma, after its ridiculous early power levels, is nerfed back to being a bridesmaid for the coming season. It looks good, but it won't outshine the bride. Now, we have great news for Witch Doctors. I did not expect this at all. The relatively tame and dull Sanctified powers have been turbocharged. The Haunt power, which previously just pulled all haunted enemies on screen towards the Witch Doctor, now automatically applies Haunt to all enemies affected by Locust Swarm. And when you cast Piranhas, you suck in all enemies on screen. And, yes, there's more. Lesser enemies stunned by a Bogadile are instantly killed, while elites and bosses are dealt massive damage. So we see the Jade Witch Doctor, Zunimasa Witch Doctor, and Mundunugu Witch Doctors benefiting from this, but Arakir Witch Doctors are absolutely busted with this. Without a nerf, Arakir Witch Doctors may be the most powerful build of Season 27. Then the Horrify Sanctified power previously gave a paltry 15% damage buff. Now it gives a 100% damage buff, a great improvement, and maybe if the previous Sanctified power is better balanced, we'll see this one being used. Then the Gargantuan one also adds a 100% damage multiplier, allowing Helltooth Witch Doctors to get a bit more powerful, but they're not in the running for a top build. As a reminder, PTR will end on August 4th. We don't have a release date for Season 27, but we're guessing late August. And that's going to wrap up this week's video, but do be sure to have checked out our last video in which we discussed the multiple signs we've seen pointing towards a Diablo 4 beta. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you saw on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.